Okay, great. So I'm really excited to introduce Kai, who's going to talk to us about user agency. And so user agency or control over um, have their online experiences is one of those principles that you see in almost every guidance on responsible tech. And it's also a principle that seems so obvious that it doesn't really need to be discussed. Yet we're here wanting to discuss it because I think there are lots of really important questions, at least that I have, such as, is designing for user agency a nice idea and concept, or does it also have a positive impact that you might be able to measure? And how do you design for agency to see those outcomes? So we're really lucky to have Kai Lukoff in our orbit and that he accepted our invitation to come and share his research and thoughts around user agency today, which was the topic of his dissertation among other publications. So Kai is now assistant professor at Santa Clara University, where he continues to research user agency and also leads the Human Computer Interaction Lab and their CS department. So Kai, welcome.
Thank you, Julia, for that kind introduction. It's really great to be here amongst both researchers and practitioners in the field.
Exactly. I'm really excited for the discussion. But let's just start off with kind of foundation work. Give us the basics, Kai. So like, what is user agency, and why should be platforms and apps be designing for it in mind?
Yeah, so I take a pretty straightforward definition of user agency and think about it as having the ability to choose your own actions and their outcomes in the world. Um, and I think it's especially relevant in today's increasingly digital world because so many of the interactions that we take there are hugely shaped or nudged, you could say, by the way that those platforms themselves are designed. And I think, you could take examples like autoplay on video sites like YouTube and Netflix, which users then often report, lead them to feeling a loss of sense of agency. And in the tech industry, this nudging is often justified in terms of freedom of choice. People are rational actors, and so therefore anything that they take as an action should reflect their real preferences or goals. But of course, we know that that's not always the case. And so then my focus on user agency, or specifically sense of agency, how people feel about their ability to control their choices and the outcomes of those choices in the world, really, I think, shifts that to think about how can we restore that agency um, into the user's hands rather than the platform sort of controlling users and just directing them wherever they want to go. And I think this is important, not only because it's one of the earliest sort of design principles that Donald Norman and other pioneers in the field of technology and other design and human computer interaction have proposed, but also because I think it has been repeatedly identified, including in self-determination theory, as one of our basic psychological needs. That is to say, along with relatedness or connectedness and competency, that sense of autonomy or agency is really critical for us to have a sense of well-being in the world. So I'll pause there and yeah.
So fantastic. There's so many directions we could go. I could ask you a million questions just on that response, but let's move to talk about more the application. And so in your dissertation, I love reading it, by the way. You talk about the tool that you developed, SwitchTube. So talk a little to us about like how that solves the user agency, or how that fulfills user agency, and then yeah, also how it works.
Yes. So a lot of my work has focused on social media because I think that when you talk to people is the most glaring example of a case where people report just getting sucked into things that they feel like they would rather not have done or where they have a loss of control. Um, And so I've explored that specifically in the case of YouTube and some of the design choices that are made there. So if I may, I'd love to play a 60-second video that just shows the SwitchTube platform and what we did there so that we can kind of ground the discussion in a specific artifact. So let me share my screen and pull that up. Can everyone see here?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So there's no sound. I'll just talk over it, and it's very short, but I think we'll give you a good sense for what we actually did in this study, and then I can discuss the findings with everyone. So we created this Android app that studies how design patterns affect the experience of watching YouTube videos. And we had three different versions of the app, what we called the Explore version, the Focus version, and the Switch version. And I'll show you a short video demo of each. So Explore was designed to undermine user agency. Its features are actually quite similar to the official YouTube mobile app. So you have a homepage with all kinds of recommendations on it. And we have a search page with lots of entertaining results. We actually slightly tweaked the search algorithm there. And then we had other current video, or the current video showing other video recommendations below it. And when one video finishes, the next video autoplays. In the Focus version, we conducted a series of surveys and interviews to identify features that would support user agency. And here we then had a homepage that was search first, and search results that were highly relevant to the search query. And there were no video recommendations and no autoplay here. In the Switch version, we actually let the user toggle back and forth between the Explore and Focus versions. So you see we have this little toggle at the bottom, and you could switch between Focus and Explore. So let me stop sharing here. What we found in that work was that there were two primary use cases for YouTube users. One was I'm on the bus, I've got 20 minutes to kill, and I want to just lean back and let you take control and show me entertaining content. And YouTube is amazing at this use case. So good. I get sucked into it that way all the time myself, and sometimes that's appropriate. However, there's also this use case of I have something specific that I want to learn in this sprawling world of YouTube, whether it's Python programming, a new research technique, or how to fix a flat tire. And in that case, YouTube's kind of terrible in the sense that you see all of this other content that's not relevant to that specific focused, often educational type query or use case. And in that case, then we found that users really benefited from being able to turn off all those other distractions on the site. And so then that option to switch was the one that users themselves rated as giving them actually the greatest sense of control over their experience. And that was actually also highly correlated with measures of satisfaction and goal alignment. So it was a case where perhaps the answer is dependent upon the use case or situation. There's not like a universal, we should always show people everything, or we should shut off all of those options. Julia, I think you're actually on mute.
Thank you. So yeah, I want to say I love SwitchTube, and I love the idea of giving folks that agency in choosing what kind of mode that they want to be in. And I want to ask about if we, so a lot of your work focuses on making sure people have agency in choosing their what experiences or having meaningful and fulfilling experiences, or having their time being meaningfully or fulfillingly spent. But how broadly can we think about agency, or in what realms can we apply it? So for example, in my breakout group, I was talking to someone who mentioned that they're interested in relationality and how agency can support users' ability to like create connection. What are other areas where we can think about agency in and being informed, being connected, etc.?
Yeah, I think it is quite broadly applicable in the sense that uh, so many of the decisions that we make in our online world are shaped or nudged by the way these platforms are designed, including, for instance, how we surface other connections on social media, like who gets into our news feed on Facebook, who gets recommended on LinkedIn in the news feed as well there, or suggested as people that we know. And um, right now, I think these platforms really respond to just behavioral signals, but don't really have any good way of uh, picking up perhaps aspirations or like more thoughtful, reflective ways of the person we would like to become or the way we'd like to shape ourselves. Instead, they're all based on these immediate uh, reactions to what's presented in front of you. And I think that's really missing something about how we see ourselves in the kind of agency that we want to have in the world. I liken it a little bit to as if you allowed Nestle or another food conglomerate to control what's in your kitchen and stock the shelves and all have all the snack displays everywhere. There's a time for cookies. Cookies are not universally bad, but you probably wouldn't design your kitchen so that you have them on display 24/7, staring at you all the time. But that's currently a lot of our digital environment, whether it comes to, decisions around privacy or decisions around relationality, or in my case, this kind of social media engagement.
I love it. I really want to have a cookie toggle in my kitchen so I can magically appear and disappear depending upon where I'm at that day. Final question, and then we're going to open up for Q&A. So if folks have questions, and I see already we have some in the chat, start formulating those. And this is a variation of a question I ask everybody, since we're really here about kind of like learning and expanding our knowledge. I have to look for my last question. I can't find it. Oh yeah. So what questions, and we do have practitioners here. What questions do you have from practitioners that would help inform your work? Yeah, or generally, what kind of questions should we be asking around agency?
Yeah, I thought about this when you shared that question with me, Julia, and two come to mind. One is that I'm inspired by some experience sampling research in psychology that's found that the two greatest sources of everyday temptations, according to experience sampling work, is um, social media, which I've already done some work on, and then also work is an interesting one. And so I'm really interested in applying this sense of agency to some of those productivity or work tools that we have in the world, like Slack or whatnot, where you can get pinged at all hours of the day and oftentimes then perhaps don't feel that sort of sense of control and get sucked into things that actually don't align with your long-term goals and conflicts. And I've certainly uh, experienced that myself with some of the communication channels that I have in my work life too. So that's one. Would love to think about sort of ways that we can, restructure that work productivity tool space around a greater sense of agency for employees or workers. And then another would be thinking about what are some of the behavioral signals and methods that we might use to create adaptive user interfaces or adaptable user interfaces in the way that we did with SwitchTube, where they apply a different user interface to different use cases so as to support kind of different needs that would align with the user's goals in those different situations, and I think by extension then support user agency.
All right, perfect. So we're gonna wrap up this recorded session in 1 second.